It may seem strange now, but not too terribly long ago, Alabama and the rest of what's viewed as the traditionally southern states were viewed as a near impregnable stronghold for the Democratic Party. One day, en masse, they all turned red, and they remain that way today. Glenn Feldman's the author of Irony of the Old South, and he's here to tell me more about it. Glenn, thank you so much for being with us today.
My pleasure.
Now, you didn't bring a copy of your book, but that won't stop us from talking all about it. What the heck happened? How did we go from being, and by we, I mean us that live in this state, and Georgia, and Tennessee, and all the other southern states.
Right.
How did the solid South, so to speak, go from being true blue Democrats to very conservative Republican red states?
Well, there are a number of answers to that question. I would say the most important answer is race, civil rights, and so forth, the reaction to civil rights. It's more complicated than that, and the book gets into a number of the reasons why. There's some economic reasons, religion, and so forth. The single most important reason was probably race and the reaction to civil rights, though. For years, for decades, the Democratic Party had been the party of white supremacy in the South. And then when that changed, starting with Franklin Roosevelt, Truman, the Kennedy brothers, Lyndon Johnson, things began to change in a big way.
Now, after Kennedy was assassinated, and he had made a push in the 60s for the civil rights.
Right.
And then Johnson came in behind him, and he was a Democrat from the South, very much what some would call a good old boy Democrat.
Oh, yeah.
And people just didn't know what he was going to do because he was from Texas. And he ended up being a big champion of civil rights and pushed for equal housing and other reforms that help people. Is that kind of what pushed southern states away from the Democratic Party?
That's probably the most important reason. There are others who would argue that suburbanization and other factors played, and they did to an extent. But Johnson, who was a New Deal Democrat from Texas, good old boy, like you say, but had been very much influenced by Franklin Roosevelt and the poverty he saw and so forth throughout the South, and managed to get through Kennedy's agenda, the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, and the Voting Rights Act was huge. So the party of Lincoln became the party of, the Democrats became the party of Roosevelt, and blacks left the party of Lincoln for the party of Roosevelt.
Now, people say many times that in our state in particular, that people tend to vote their religious beliefs above what would be best for them economically and socially.
Right.
And that's part of the modern Republican Party.
Right. I'm not sure it's such a good thing to boast about. I think that there's, on a certain level, there's a certain pride that's taken there. The problem is that there are certain political players who cynically tap into people's religious beliefs and tend to focus on one or two very emotional issues for them that cause people to tend to forget about those issues that affect them day to day. So if I can get you as a voter on one particular religious hot button issue and cause you to turn off your mind in terms of other rational economic issues, then I have you, and I have that vote. So it's kind of a slippery slope. That's a tough subject.
Understood. Is there any chance that the South will revert or change again?
Absolutely. I think the South is, more than anything else, the South is conservative, and the party that best reflects that conservatism will have their allegiance, and has in the past. And for years, for decades, that was the Democratic Party, the conservative and Democratic, and now it's been the Republican Party for decades. And yes, if the Republican Party moves away from that, certainly. The South will go whichever way the conservatism goes.
Glenn, thanks so much for being with us today.
Sure.
You can find out more about Irony of the Solid South by calling 205-348-1566 or online at uapress.ua.edu. Well, the